drive. Tatum the finish. It is banner 18. The mission commanded is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of You Got Boston, live from Little Caesars Arena in Detroit, where the Celtics just dropped their third consecutive game to open up the season. This one a 119-113 loss to the Pistons, a game that they led by as many as 17 in the first half, ultimately trailed by double digits for much of the second half, made a little bit of a push, but lose this one by 6. And we have a lot to talk about. I'm in the press room where Joe Mazzulla was there about an hour ago. And we sat over here in the red chair, so you get a little bit of a view of what this room looks like. And once again, those of you that watched last episode know what the deal is going to be with You Got Boston this season. And those of you that didn't, I'll explain it off the top. And I'm going to also try to slow down my speak because I feel like I get a lot of YouTube comments that say talk a little more slowly. So this is me trying. This is an episode where I'm going to make a concerted effort. So after every game, we do the Garden Report on CLNS Media. You can watch that show. It's about an hour and a half. We have 5 or 6 of us that are on that show. We play sound from the locker room. We discuss what went wrong. And it's a good space to go. And if you're upset about the game, we go live literally as soon as the game ends. Over here, I'm going to focus on one encouraging takeaway from each game. Some games are going to be a lot harder than others. Part of why I'm doing that is to just have there be a little bit of a distinction between my coverage on the Garden Report and my coverage here. But another reason why I'm doing that is because, honestly, I think sports bring a lot of joy, and losing typically doesn't bring that. And I'm never going to lie or distort kind of like what it is that I'm seeing on the floor. But at the same time, we know what this year is going to be. This year is not going to be like the previous couple of seasons. And I want to make sure that there's still a way that you can extract things from this game that can impact the team moving forward, whether that's later in this season or in future seasons. It's easy to say all the things that went wrong when a team is losing, and that's important, and we'll do that, and I'll write about it and all of those things. But on this podcast, I'm going to mostly focus on the most encouraging positive takeaway from each win. So as I mentioned before, if that sounds like I don't want to hear it, they just lost 3 games, that's totally fine. This won't be for everyone. But I think it will be for some people. So that's kind of the point here. And we'll have plenty of other analysis and coverage on the CLNS Media YouTube channel. I'll also briefly mention I have a WNBA channel, so you can check out my coverage over there at WNBA Today on CLNS. And the fun thing is that a lot of times when I'm at Celtics games or I'm at Celtics related things, that actually serves as inspiration for my WNBA coverage. Like, for example, the Seattle Storm just hired a coach, Sonia Rahman, and Xavier Tillman used to play for her. So while I was on the road at MSG, I was able to talk to Xavier Tillman about his experience playing for her. So as much as I can, I try to converge kind of the coverage there. So that's my disclaimer. I'm going to stop giving that disclaimer at the beginning of episodes, but figured not everybody listened to the game 2 or the loss of the Knicks episode where I explained that. So if you're wondering why this is an episode focusing on the positives, that's kind of the MO for this show this season, at least to start. I can always reevaluate that. Maybe if they're 0-30 or something, then I'll figure out a new platform. So in any case, there's one big takeaway from me in this game, and that is that I think Jaylen Brown looks a lot more comfortable. He told us after the game that he is still dealing with his hamstring strain that he now suffered about a week and a half ago. And he said the first 2 weeks are the highest risk for re-injury. And so that's been on his mind, right? So for people that have watched Jaylen play this season, I think he's gotten a lot of flack for the Celtics starting 0-3, and that's fair because he is one of the leaders for this team. So he's going to get the credit. He's going to get the blame. He had 7 turnovers against New York, and I think that is never a good sign for him nor for the Celtics offense. Especially because some of those are usually unforced or just kind of like just a bad read, a bad drive. Once in a while, if it's a playmaking thing, then maybe you live with those, but 7 is too much. And he bounced back really well in this game. He has 41 points in this one. For the most part, I felt like he really picked his spots. I asked Joe about it post game, and Joe basically said, like Jaylen is just finding where he needs to go. He is getting to his spots. When we've watched Jaylen play for a decade now, like what his bread and butter is. And I think that there were moments earlier this season in the first 2 games where he is really trying to get everybody involved. He's really trying to not overdo it, not kind of take the ball and just do his own one-on-one thing. But at the same time, like his number one quality is that he's a really good scorer. And so you don't want to move away from that. And so they didn't win this game, but I don't think it's because Jaylen Brown took over on offense. In fact, I think that was one of the keys for them staying in it, despite the fact that they were out rebounded by 17 rebounds. He finishes with 41 points, only a handful of turnovers, which is critical. And I think he mentioned this post game, but the biggest area of growth for him at this point, for me, from my standpoint, is rebounding, because this team is massively undersized and just don't have enough prolific rebounders. And they're also scrambling on defense, which I've really loved the new defensive scheme where they're swarming and kind of putting two on the ball and all of that. But it does make it a little harder to be in the right rebounding position. And so somebody like Jaylen, who has never been like a huge rebounder for the Celtics when there's been so much size on the floor, and usually Jason Tatum's been their leading rebounder, now he is going to have to step up in that regard. And he has said it himself after each of these last two losses, both in New York and both tonight in Detroit. He's made very clear that he needs to get better on that front. But something that was creeping in my mind, I don't know if it was in other people's mind, was he looked a step slow, I thought, in that Knicks game, or just not 100% himself. And even in that opening night game, there was a layup that he went for where normally, like, healthy Jaylen would just dunk that shot. And my concern is just like, is there a potential knee injury that is still a remnant from last season's? He did have off-season knee surgery, and while we heard only good things about his recovery and he was cleared relatively quick, and we know he worked really hard to rehab, there's always some concern with knee injuries that there is some carryover, especially with meniscus injuries, which he had a partially torn meniscus and he did the trim and all of that, or at least that's what we infer from the little, reporting that we have around this procedure. Ultimately, I don't think that's what's holding him back right now. And in fact, if there's anything, it's left over from the hamstring strain that he suffered in the last preseason game, which honestly wasn't that severe, or else he would have missed some time here, and he didn't. And he actually intends to play Monday night against the Pelicans as well. If you're watching this episode, you're probably watching this on Monday. So later today, he should be available to play. That's his intent. That's what he made clear. And he wants to win these games. And, fans might say, what's the point of Jaylen Brown playing on a back-to-back when the team is 0-3, they're not going anywhere? But these guys are competitors. That's always going to be the intention. So 41 points for him tonight is really good to see. And besides for that, he has been shooting lights out from three. He was 5 of 9 from three in this game. Entering tonight, he was shooting 45% from three. Small sample, just as I don't overreact to shooting struggles, I also am not going to overreact to a 3-game hot streak from beyond the arc. That being said, he has looked a lot more confident just shooting the ball in general, a lot more fluid. He's getting clean looks. I like him shooting off the dribble, off of picks. And if he can be he's not going to be a 50% three-point shooter, but if he can be back to kind of some of his previous years where he was an above average or league average three-point shooter, that's going to really open up things both for him and the Celtics. So I'm encouraged to see that he is attempting these threes, that he looks like he wants to take the 3-point shots that he's getting, and then obviously that he's hitting them. And so if that can continue, and he is somebody that is now shooting 37% from three versus 32% from last year, 5 percentage points might not feel like a huge difference for the average person sitting at home, but it makes a big difference for how opposing teams' defenses are going to treat Jaylen. And if they're respecting his 3-point shot the way the teams respect Tatum's, who, it's not like Tatum's a 43% 3-point shooter, but teams always respect his shot. That opens up things for everybody else. And so I am encouraged that despite the loss, he had this really good individual performance, especially on the offensive end. And then through stretches, it wasn't a perfect game. I think down the stretch, he had a couple of drives that I'm sure he'd like to take back, a couple of off times where he rebounded his own miss that he just wasn't able to convert. And in a 6-point game, you want those back. But big picture, it's a good sign to see him being able to do this, especially because we know he's not 100%. And it's also a good sign that if it does look like to viewers at home and to myself here in the arena that he's ailing a little bit, it's not that his knee is all messed up from the offseason surgery, but it's just not 100% this hamstring that he re-injured at the beginning of preseason, or not re-injured. I think it was the first time injuring that hamstring in that last preseason game that he left and didn't come back for. So he didn't go through practice that the day after. He went through a couple of practices before opening night. By all accounts, this is not something that's like sidelined him aggressively. But that being said, I think he looked pretty good today. And I'll just add on the encouraging front, historically, Jaylen Brown usually gets the toughest defensive matchups, especially on opposing teams' guards. And he usually does a really good job. He obviously has the size, the athleticism. He's a good on-ball defender. Everybody knows that at this point. But it's also really draining to be an on-ball defender for 40 minutes and have to score 40 points. And so, on the note of what I took away as encouraging from this game, in addition to Jaylen Brown's offensive explosion in this one, he wasn't the guy that was guarding Cade Cunningham for most of the game. And that guy, for a large part of the game, and it wasn't the whole game because he only played 18 minutes, but that was Hugo Gonzalez, who got his first start ever as an NBA player just 2 days after making his NBA debut at Madison Square Garden. And I'll just say about Hugo, we all know he's 19 years old. We all know he is far from a finished product, and everybody has praised what he brings to the table, the intensity that he plays with. And he's only getting better. So if you're somebody that's kind of not sold on this season even being worth it, and you'd rather just see the Celtics tank and get a lottery pick, and like my brother texted me that he wants to see AJ in a Celtics jersey, he's going to look great in a Celtics jersey, is not going to be so fun. If you're one of those people, you're thinking to yourself, okay, which players from this current group are going to be a part of the next great Celtics team? When Tatum comes back and when they have added more front court depth, which of these guys in the rotation is actually going to be impactful? And I think Hugo right now is at the top of that list because he's on a rookie deal, so that's a good thing. They have him locked up for the next couple of seasons. So a couple of these guys are on expiring deals. Chris Boucher is on a 1-year deal. Josh Minott and Luka Garza are on 2-year deals. Obviously, Anthony Simons is on an expiring deal, but Hugo is one of the guys that they have a multi-year contract for because he was just drafted. And when he was just drafted, we didn't know a ton about him, and I made my last episode mostly about him. But in the context of talking about Jaylen Brown's game, I think part of what enabled Jaylen to do more on the offensive end is that Hugo handled some of those responsibilities, and that's going to continue to be a good thing. Whether that's taking some of the load off of Payton Pritchard, off of Derek White. Like, they don't have Drew Holiday anymore. They don't have Al Horford anymore. They don't have Jason Tatum. I'm not going to keep rattling off the list every episode, but it's a lot of defensive talent that they lost this season. And so it is extremely helpful to have a guy whose number one focus on the floor is defend. And that is what Hugo did in this game. And honestly, I would have liked to see him play even more than he did. He played 18 minutes. I don't know if there were any reasons for that limitation, but it opens it up for everybody else, and it sets a great tone. And it wasn't just him. I thought Josh Minott had some good moments defensively in the previous game. Chris Boucher was kind of his partner in crime, but he is helping set a tone right now. And that's a really good sign because he's only 19, and you would think that he'd be following the lead of other guys, but I feel like he's actually been kind of a tone setter for this group. I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this football season on Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. And I still have to go to my first ever football game that is going to happen this season. It is fun. It's simple. You can select your favorite players. Right now, I think everybody in Boston's favorite player is Drake May, who I don't know a ton about football, but it seems like he is really having a spectacular rookie season that is exciting a lot of people and hopefully can distract some people from any frustrations they have about the other Boston teams. But Prize Picks, it's simple to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. Play Prize Picks to get action on football in more than 40 states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks also offers injury reboots, so if one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks won't count it as a loss, which is obviously hugely helpful. You don't have to worry about guys going down and that impacting your picks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So I mentioned Jaylen Brown, who was a positive in this game. Jaylen had 41 points on 12 of 25 shooting, 5 of 9 from the field, 12 of 25 from the line, which is also always a good sign for Jaylen, who at times in his career has really struggled from the free throw line. But if he is going to draw such a heavy percentage of the team's free throws, in this game it was 15 of 24 of their attempts, then him shooting the ball well is critical. And so that was a good sign for sure in this one as well. The other thing that I'll mention, and maybe this is more of like a multiple encouraging takeaways from this game, is I know a lot of people were worried about Payton Pritchard as a starter. And I think I understand where that comes from because he has come off the bench for all of his NBA career. He started, I think, one game last year, but was obviously sixth man of the year. And the game that he started last year, he struggled. He was in Portland and he was in front of his friends and family, and he got in foul trouble early on. And he kind of joked, I think it was in his walk-off interview, like maybe I'm better as a bench player. Just kind of making fun of himself for that poor performance. But we're 3 games in. I've heard the concerns. A lot of people are worried about his ability to make that leap into being the starting point guard for this team. And I don't think he had the perfect game today. I don't think he's played up to his potential as a Celtics player on this roster. But he did have a pretty solid stat line, 21 points on 8 of 16 shooting, 10 rebounds. That was the game high, or sorry, the Celtics high, definitely not the game high. Jaylen Brown had 17 boards. But Pritchard has 10 rebounds, which is 4 more than the next guy. Jaylen Brown and Neemias Queta each had 6. 3 of his rebounds were on the offensive end. He has 4 assists, which is also tied for a team high, and only 1 turnover. And the one thing that I'll say about Payton Pritchard and all of these guys is turnovers is a massive priority. I think that's where Jaylen's going to be, that's going to be a focus for him on the offensive end, is limiting turnovers. He had 4 in this one. Celtics have 12 as a team, but they forced 16. So they did a good job on that front. What I'll say though is, for him to have 1 turnover in these games, it's a good thing. It's somebody who had the ball in his hands quite a bit. What people want to see, I think, is him hitting his threes, which he has not done this season so far. And they want to see him being more of a playmaker. And I asked him about both of those things after this game. One, the 3-point shooting, because he was 2 of 8 from 3 in this game. And right after he made his first 3, he was he had such a visceral reaction. He looked so relieved. And I asked him about that, and he said, I'm just missing shots that he said, you see it, these are open looks. And so I know there's been a lot of discussion around okay, can he handle better defensive pressure? Because obviously right now the defense is much more intense than it was, as far as where he is on the opposing team scouting reports. He is higher up on scouting reports than he was last year. He was maybe 5th or 6th last year, and he's probably 3rd right now, if not higher. So that's one thing that you have to kind of overcome. But I think he's getting really good looks, and the fact that he's able to still kind of put up some sort of numbers, despite the fact that his 3-point shot is clearly off, is a good thing. And he said, I've been overthinking quite a bit. He said in the first couple of games, the ball didn't even feel right, kind of leaving his hand. And in this game, the ball at least felt better leaving his hand. It's still not 100%. But guys go through shooting slumps all the time, and the timing of those slumps changes whether or not they become big discussion topics. That's something I've noticed in my 2.5 years covering the Celtics, that there are moments where a shooting slump kind of goes under the radar because the team is still winning. There was a point, I think it was Porzingis, either last year or the year before, but he missed 25 straight threes, and nobody even talked about it because the Celtics were winning, and so it just didn't really matter. But it was a couple weeks where his shot was completely off. And then there are other times where a guy's missing their threes, and it's a national discussion because it's having more ramifications on the floor. And Payton Pritchard has had a couple of these bad shooting streaks during my time covering him. The beginning of not last year, but the year prior, the championship season, he could not hit anything for the first few weeks, and he was still in the rotation. And Joe Mazzulla kind of said, this is a testament to everything else that he's able to do. So right now, he is in one of those stretches where he is not hitting threes, and there is no reason to think that that's not going to turn around. But I do think that when it does, both him and Derek White, who was 3 of 11 in this one, and also has been struggling a little bit from beyond the arc, that's going to really open up things for this team, because you're not going to overcome the 17 rebound disparity if you're not shooting lights out. And the rebounding disparity has to be taken care of. It's never going to be in their favor. I don't think they're going to out-rebound teams very often, but being out-rebounded by 17 rebounds is quite a bit. The Pistons had 30 second chance points. That's a lot of second chance points. And especially down the stretch, there were some key defensive possessions that ended like that. So they're going to have to figure that out. I'm not making any excuses for that end. And I think some of it is schematic and some of it is just individual. But then at the same time, they're going to have to also shoot the ball better. And I actually am encouraged from Payton's performance. And from what he said post-game is that he feels like these are really good looks and that he's just not hitting them. And he needs to just stop thinking about it. And you can tell, he's one of those guys that's actively in his head. Sam Hauser is, Derek White is. Some guys you could just, they wear it on their face. And they're all wearing it on their face right now, that they're extremely frustrated with the fact that these good looks are not falling. So listen, I'm not gonna say the Celtics are in a great spot right now. They've dropped their first 3 games of the season. Obviously, they want to have won one, if not more of those. I mean, they want to have won all 3 really, but I think they feel like these are winnable games where they are right there. They outscored the Pistons in the first and the fourth quarter, but ultimately, like, you have 2 quarters in the middle there where you were outscored by double digits each one. You're not going to overcome that. You're not going to overcome the rebounding disparity. I thought they did a pretty good job on Cade Cunningham, who had 25 points on 8 of 18 shooting to go along with 6 turnovers. Like, you'll live with that, but it's the front court rebounding, the second chance points, all of that you're not going to really be able to overcome. And so we'll see how everything shakes up here Monday night in New Orleans. They'll chase their first win. We'll see how Jaylen Brown responds on the second night of a back-to-back. Maybe the Celtics are going to try to get him to not play, but he sounded pretty adamant post-game. So if you're looking for takeaways from this one, the Celtics have continued to solidify Hugo Gonzalez as a player of the future, for the future, I should say. And Jaylen Brown looks a lot better. You know, if you look now through 3 games, he's been fine for them. I'm not overly concerned about it. There are going to be some growing pains. It's not going to be perfect, but I don't think there's too much to worry about with him individually. It's just about how is everything going to come together offensively. That's really the big question. So that's it for now. I'll have another episode after the Pelicans game, and then we'll be back for one game at home against the Cavs before hitting the road once again for the 76ers. So this is a really tough schedule. If I feel that way, I can only imagine how the players feel. But thank you, as always, for watching. I appreciate you all. Leave your comments in the comment section. Were there other things that were encouraging to you? Tell me why my takes suck. It can all go down there. It all helps. So let us know what you think below, and I'll have more coverage coming up soon. Subscribe to CLNS Media for all of our press conferences. We have Joe Mazzulla, Payton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown in their own words talking after this loss. You can hear what they had to say. Honestly, I thought they were all in a better spirits than I anticipated, especially Payton. I felt like he felt a little better about this one, like they're making good progress. So that's it for now. Enjoy, everybody, and we'll have more coverage coming soon.